at Manifest Destiny. A lot of this hopefully will be a little bit of a review. We've seen this picture before in the classroom, and we analyzed this picture in class. Let's try to reflect back on the visual symbols that we see in this picture and how they help to project the idea of Manifest Destiny. First, of course, we split the picture in half, okay? And where's the angel going? She's heading west. We see the contrast between the light and the dark, civilization versus savages, religion, enlightenment versus backward ways of the Native Americans. We see knowledge, education. You see here she's carrying with her a telegraph, technology. Here come the trains coming west. The people, obviously here are the settlers. Here's some miners coming out west. Stagecoaches. And then if you look at all the way back here in the background, we have industry and cities and civilization. This is the projected image here of Manifest Destiny. Also, hard to see here, but we see actually farming going on here. And then down here in the corner, we see Native Americans running, trying to escape the progress of America coming west. Now, what is Manifest Destiny? And the idea of heading west across the United States, for the United States to take up all the territory going from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Okay? That was the idea of Manifest Destiny. It's also unfulfilled. The original idea of Manifest Destiny is that all of Central America and all of Canada will become part of the United States. So in some respects, obviously Manifest Destiny is not finished, but that was the original intent, it's the original idea behind Manifest Destiny, that we would control the entire continent. As it is, we have settled on the current borders, and Manifest Destiny became just simply controlling everything between the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. Now why, or a lot of this was a religious belief that we were destined by God to expand west. We were going to bring civilization, we were going to bring enlightenment, we were going to bring education all throughout the western United States. Many people looked at the Native American lands in the west and looked at them as being unimproved, unsettled, and just wide open. They felt like the Native Americans out west have not fulfilled their duty as people to improve the land and control the land, and therefore it was okay for them just to be pushed aside. And this is the basic tenet of Manifest Destiny. It's God's will, economic opportunities, and fertile farmland. Now, how do we get to acquire this land that we are going to get to fulfill Manifest Destiny? We'll get it from Russia, Great Britain, Mexico, even going back with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Different things that are going to help bring settlers west. We can look at some key specific events. The Gold Rush of 1849, perhaps the most important event that's going to help bring people out west. We have hundreds of thousands of people coming west across the plains. We have them coming across or around South America by boat. We have them coming across the Pacific from Japan and China, all looking out for their quick get-rich scheme of discovering gold in California. Now there'll be a number of other gold rushes in the west, in Colorado, the Black Hills, Nevada, in the mid to late 1800s, where help continue to bring settlers out to the western United States. Open land. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago how the Native Americans, it was viewed that they had not improved the land. There was obviously in the Great Plains millions of acres available for settlement, and this becomes an even larger draw in the Homestead Act of 1862. The Northern government during the Civil War was willing to give out 160 acres of land to any family that would head west and settle west, and all I had to do was improve the land in the space of 5 years. Improving meant farming, building a house, settling on the land, and doing something with it. In 1869, 4 years after the end of the Civil War, the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. The importance of the Transcontinental Railroad is now these people that had moved west 30, 20 years before, that were farming, that were raising cattle, now they're going to have easy access to markets in the east. They could simply take their cattle, put them on a train in Omaha, and the next day it could be in a slaughterhouse in Chicago. This is going to open up new markets to these settlers, and it's going to help draw people out west, because now they see, hey, we can go out there and we actually have some economic benefit to raising cattle or corn or whatever perhaps might be out in the west, and get them to market and make a ton of money. Others came out not for economic reasons. Some people, the Mormons specifically, are going to come out west to escape religious persecution. They'd been chased out of Missouri and Illinois. They head to modern day Utah. Utah becomes a state in 1896 when the Mormons get enough settlers in Utah. And then the last thing that perhaps we might see for people coming out west is simply adventure. Whether it's Indian wars, the idea of going out to a new land, but there is a definite idea of adventure for a lot of people going out west, and the connection with that then would be escaping the law, especially Americans going to Texas before Texas became part of the United States. American West. So let's take a look at how we acquired all this land to expand westward. In 1803, we purchased Louisiana from France. Now this is obviously going back a number of years, but it doubles the size of the United States in 1803. Here's the original land after the American Revolution. And now we bring in all this new territory, basically essentially the Great Plains. So you have open land. When Thomas Jefferson bought this, he said it was going to be, now we'd have enough land in the United States for 1,000 generations to settle. He's a little off on that. Coming up next, Texas annexation in 1845. Texas, of course, breaks off from Mexico in 1836, wins its independence. At that time, it was not good for them to become part of the United States. We really didn't want them, and Texas kind of struggles along on its own for 9 years. Mexico continually intervenes in Texan affairs, and finally in 1845, the United States accepts Texas as a state. And you can see here, this was the original size of Texas. And when Texas comes in, it gives up all this territory here to the American government to pay off its debt. Because Texas becomes part of the United States, Mexico does not like that, and the Mexican War ensues. The war between Mexico and the United States, the end result of that is we win, and we get all this land as well. The unfortunate timing for the country of Mexico is right as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was being signed, that gave away all this territory to Mexico, or from Mexico to the United States. Gold is being discovered right here in California at Sutter's Mill in late 1848. This is going to bring about the gold rush of 1849. And we see some other things going on up here. Great Britain here and Great Britain there kind of traded some territory back and forth. This was in 1818. And then the last bit that you see up here, the Oregon Territory of 1846. We had an agreement with Great Britain. This was kind of a dual. Both of us owned it up until 1846. In 1846, we took sole ownership of this area, and Great Britain took sole ownership of the area north in Canada, modern-day British Columbia. If you want to keep going, of course, we can go to 1867, when we purchased Alaska from Russia, and then 1898, when we annexed Hawaii, in the Spanish-American War that came shortly after that, when we get Puerto Rico. So this is really the idea of manifest destiny. These are the lands we get because of this belief in manifest destiny. Now, this is not, of course, some empty territory. There are millions of people who live out in the western United States. Most of them do not want us to see us go out there. As we go west, okay, we look up in the northern area where the Transcontinental Railroad is going. Excuse me, that's a little off. All right. Going through this way, and here we can see the Sioux Indians. That's their area. The Cheyenne. Neither one of them are going to be very happy about the United States coming out into the west. There'll be a lot of wars going on between the Sioux and the American Army. As we go east or down to the south, the Apache, of course, aren't going to be all that thrilled either, as American settlers trudge this way to get out to California. And we'll see a series of wars between American forces and the Apaches as well. Now, this is a whole other unit to look at and study. We're not going to get into the details of the Indian Wars right at this moment. We do need to recognize the idea first, though, that this was not just some vast open plain where nobody lived. It was filled with Native Americans. And the Native Americans also, we have this idea that they weren't farmers, that they just left this area wide open. And to some extent, it's true when you look at the tribes that are actually chasing the buffalo. But they also knew where to go at different points to collect food. They weren't necessarily farmers, but they were definitely gatherers. And they had improved the land somewhat to kind of draw out where they knew where they could pick berries and different fruits along the plains, especially down in the valleys of the rivers. It's also this belief that all these Native American tribes are just kind of the idea that they were all just friendly to each other, that it was like one big utopia, that the American settlers going west kind of idea that this was all some big utopia going out here west, that all these Native American tribes kind of lived together in harmony. And that's not true. There are a lot of wars and fighting and battles between these Native American tribes. The Sioux Indians that control the northern plains when the American settlers start to arrive. They had just arrived there maybe 150, 200 years before. When the first European settlers come in and they introduced the horse and rifles that are, well, especially coming from Canada, it's going to alter the balance of power out in the western United States. The Sioux take advantage of that and are able to expand the reach of their territory and become kind of the dominant Native American force in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So it's not like we're encroaching upon some utopian society of Native Americans, although some people like to believe that. Okay, to finish up, sum up here, the idea of a manifest destiny, that we will go from the Atlantic west to Pacific. What's going to drive us out there? The gold rush in California, the Homestead Act, 163 acres of land, the Transcontinental Railroad going west. And all these things are going to help drive people to the western United States and help fulfill the idea of manifest destiny in the United States. These are things that you need to know when it comes time for Westward Expansion. Thank you.